See, get my button pushed, turn on this mic, tap, okay. All right, it's gonna pick me up. Hello, it's coming through. All right, try to do this fancy thing. Whoa.
Like Madonna now.
Whoa. All right. Yeah, wasn't expecting my Madonna dance this morning. Okay. Hi. Welcome to my talk. Today it is called Evolving Priorities, Tech, Community, and Impact. I was kind of looking for a framing of this, and I think I'm going to dedicate it to those that align their personal goals with a larger purpose. I think that's a good framing. I go by Nerdstein. I've been around, I know all of you. And this is a completely 100% real picture of me. Just taken a few days ago. I stopped off at the beach on the way over here. Decided to do that. I'm the Vice President of Engineering at Hook 42. I want to thank my team at Hook 42 for allowing me to be here. I took some time. I did a training yesterday. Also for helping collaborate with me on the topic. I want to thank Aaron for his review last night. Thank you so much. He's going to be, throwing tomatoes at me or yelling at me if I get off script here. But yeah, I want to just thank everyone for being here and everything. It's really nice to be a part of this kind of fun community of cool people. So I want to give a brief outline of what I'm planning to talk about. So I'm going to start by looking at relevance. And then I'm going to move on to understanding purpose, evolving yourself, evolving Drupal, and then I'll conclude. Nothing fancy. All right, so in this section, I want to try to provide a little bit of background on how relevance factors into our industry. All right, so who remembers a picture like this? Anybody, right? So this looks and is not identical, but looks extremely similar to the Windows XP background, right? Back in the day, yeah? Looked just a bit like that. And I saw this image as I was kind of planning this talk out, and I thought, I really wonder if people think that this is what the tech industry looks like, right? It's these blue skies, perfect landscape, green fields, right? It's beautiful. They see companies making these massive profits. They see job openings all the time. They hear about all the innovation that we do in this industry. And they see these big and bright futures where these skills are there and the jobs exist in this country where in other aspects of it right now it's kind of waning, right? So that was kind of grounding for me a bit, even though it's just a picture, right? But I think there's a bit more to this story. The grass is not always greener on the other side. Right? You've heard it. I don't even know who wrote it. So are there benefits of this industry? Are there great things about it? Are there really things that are awesome and look green and blue skies and everything? Absolutely. But I think it does come at a cost. Successful technologists are forced to deal with a rapidly changing landscape. In 2017, the Washington Post examined this in two very specific areas. So let's take a look at the data. It might be a little hard to see. So on the left, it's 1985, the whole way up to 2015, a little bit beyond, so probably 2018. Or actually, it was in 2017, sorry about that. So this shows, I want to kind of focus on a 10-year span from about 2000 and on. And what we saw during that time, our country was predominantly beginning to roll out broadband in homes, and the use of smartphones was starting to take off, right? And for tech, this was both a blessing and a curse. So just imagine for 1 second the flood of internet traffic caused by this shift alone, right? And imagine every website immediately needing to become responsive to these new smartphones. And imagine an entirely new tech industry around native mobile apps. So just for that one thing up there, right, had a huge impact. And this is all in just 10 years, okay? So let me throw out a few other major things that happened in a 10-year period. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. Cloud computing, DevOps, digital currencies, virtual reality, self-driving cars, right? Smart appliances, that stupid fridge that can talk to you. Voice-based interfaces, right? And more. Alexa, buy me a pizza. The opportunity is abound. But this kind of rapid shift and innovation, it has a real and very true impact on people. Staying relevant is really hard for people in this industry. It requires a commitment to lifelong learning and a constant refresh of your skills. The technical skills that you acquire, they might even have an unknown shelf life. You learn or adopt a new technology, there's no guarantee that something a week later won't come and transform it. On the other end, expectations are rather high for learning on the fly. Consider this. Your company sold a job with a specific technology, but you just lost your expert on your team, and he took a job with another company. Those kinds of situations create a pressure cooker for whoever ends up getting stuck with that scenario. And there might be some training that's offered, and that's good, that's healthy, and that's fine. But I kind of believe and feel like expertise comes from years of hands-on training and doing things right and exploring and learning. Being thrown right into the fire of delivering and learning is an extremely stressful experience, but one that we're asked to do all the time. We've compounded this by blurring the lines between disciplines in our industry. And this photo up here kind of shows a stack of books, which is kind of an analogy for what we like to call these full stack positions that we have today. As if it's not enough to ask someone to be an expert in one really large area, we now have positions that ask for expertise in many large areas. And while this might make sense for some organizations, it really makes me begin to feel like the demand for certain jobs is growing. But I want to pause a bit from just these technical skills. So in our industry, it's really not just the technical skills that are relevant. People are also required to have really strong analytical skills and use logic to help them solve problems, right? But it's these same skills that teach us to think critically, to judge good solutions from bad ones, and ultimately become opinionated, right? People subsequently, they settle into their opinions and their own patterns of behavior through these learned behaviors, all driven by their own experience. And Marina Abramovic had a kind of nice quote for this. Your ego can become an obstacle to your work. If you start believing in your greatness, it's the death of your own creativity. Think about that for a second. It's these same analytical skills and the experience that you think is making you better, that you acquire all throughout your career, that actually hurt you. This is all too common, especially when we get behind a keyboard. Holy crap. Our egos seem to explode. I've seen so many people in this industry leverage their analytical skill and their logic to criticize others openly in issue queues, on social media, and so much more. I really believe that this is the absolute wrong way to use these skills. But we see these critical opinions that bring the rise of toxicity into our industry and into our communities. Egos can become really present, especially for top-notch engineers, those folks that have the really amazing technical expertise. And this can manifest itself as a concept that we've called the rock star developer, right? How many people have heard of that? I'm sure a lot of folks, yeah. There was a blog post written towards the end of 2017, kind of caught fire a bit and people were talking a lot about it. The title of it was called, "We Fired Our Top Talent, Best Decision We Ever Made," right? And this was a story of, a really high-performing team member that routinely just took on too much, okay? He solved the hardest problems. He worked the longest hours. It really definitely took on a lot. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, opportunities were being robbed from the rest of the team. There's people on the team that probably wanted to do stuff and couldn't. This guy got burnt out. He became a jerk. And things started looking really bad at that point in time, right? And the rock star got fired. Actually lost his job, right? And I can't help but wonder if his ego didn't cause it. In some ways, I also feel like the organization failed him and the rest of the team by not recognizing the situation that was happening. But what's relevant here for us in the room is we could probably have some of the best technical skill in the world, and we can still get fired. In the next section, I want to talk about understanding purpose. So how can someone who is extremely technically gifted, analytical, good problem solver in this industry still get canned? Why, right? I kind of think they maybe didn't understand the purpose. So we're going to look into this topic a little bit deeper. This picture here shows a really super old computer. It's called the EDSAC. And it was about 1949, University of Cambridge. And that acronym stands for Electronic Delay Storage Automatic Computer. Blah, 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 blah. That's a mouthful. All right. So for today's standards, right, let's just take a quick glance at this. This computer took up the better part of an entire room. It was massive, right? I mean, it probably would be most of this front of the room here, right? It was huge. And this thing read tapes and basically just to execute these programs that were being written. But if you think about it, this thing was really nothing more than a giant calculator of today's standards, right? Even a basic one, right? One really cool thing, though, is because of this machine, it created the world's first assembler language, which was pretty neat. Many of the concepts discovered by this innovation paved the way for actual programs and programming and operating systems today. And arguably, computer science as a discipline. This is one of the first. Paved the way, right? Cambridge didn't spend a ton of money creating that big piece of hardware just to fill a huge room with a giant computer because it sounded cool, right? They saw tremendous potential to perform complex calculations that could push science, as of that day, beyond its current limits. The effects on society were potentially boundless at that point in time. And it was the start of something huge. So in our industry, long have we focused on these skills, and yet we see our ego taking over because of these skills. But we're missing the real purpose here, and the real purpose is serving people. In many of the previous examples that I shared, I feel like there's an element of humanity that's missing in that. We are people. Those that we are interacting with are people. Those that we are serving are also people. But we argue over our technical opinions, we criticize other people, and we put our personal needs and our ego before that of others. Our industry sometimes feels more like a deeply competitive game of Survivor than one driven by purpose. So we need to shift our perspective of just having skills to one of impact. If our purpose is truly about serving people, it is the impact that matters. Tony Robbins had a quote for this. The only limit to your impact is your imagination and commitment. And this quote pretty well summarizes my perspective on this. It is our individual responsibility to have and create the impact that we desire. It is on us to think bigger and beyond our own frame of reference to achieve what we are able to do in this world. So I've identified a couple, I call them pro tips, to help promote impact and subsequently drive some purpose. So this is kind of some of my thoughts, some opinions in here. So we'll look at prioritization, efficacy, enablement, continuous learning, and experiments. All right, let's start with prioritization. So impact can come in all sizes. I mean, you can have really huge impact on things, or you can have really small impact on things. It kind of takes a lot of different shapes. But it's my belief that to understand purpose, we need to prioritize based on what delivers the most, right? We need to recognize that sizing. And this is particularly relevant in our community. There are 1,000 things that you could probably dive into, just speculating. How do you choose, right? Prioritizing by impact seems to be a wise way to frame it. Our time is finite, especially our free time. Many of us have families. We have hobbies that we like to do outside of work, hopefully non-technical ones. And things that are capable of pulling our attention, like binge watching Netflix, right? Everyone loves it. But if you don't prioritize well, ultimately this can add stress and cause burnout, because you still want to be relevant, right? So let's move on to efficacy. I kind of feel like people need to focus on their strengths, and they need to lower their expectations a bit and recognize that you don't need to be good at everything. If you're trying to have an impact and you know you don't have endless time available to commit to something, why don't you focus on where you can be most effective? I think it's important. And I tend to look at this as the working smarter, not harder philosophy. It's like you don't have to do more, maybe you need to do better, right? And it's not suggesting that you should only do what is safe for you, or that you can't take risks, or you can't learn new things, or that you can't become effective at something else. But even then, you should just always be focused on building off of your strengths, right? And I think that's a good frame of reference. And I think this can also really help people if you know your strengths and you have some self-awareness. It can help you to recognize when it's appropriate to delegate or seek assistance for things that other people are able to help you out with. Together, you and the people that you delegate or work with can both have impact and probably take less time than either of you would independently, right? It's more efficient. So let's look at enablement a little bit here. My claim is that our ideal purpose is really around people and their problems, right? But commonly, I've seen people make it about their own responsibility in that. But what if one of our responsibilities was to enable other people to succeed? Force multiplying is a concept that kind of combines things like knowledge sharing, helping out with blockers, giving people feedback to help build them up. And in any given team, imagine one person kind of serving as a bottleneck. It's like, hey, I've just got so much stuff to do, and you've got 60 hours of work piled up that you don't even know what to do with, right? And they're the only expert in that specific thing because all the work piles up on them. So why not create new leaders? Why not build people up and give them the skills that they need to take over? You're also helping them grow, right? I see that as a tremendously powerful thing. If you're enabling others, that exponentially spreads. You help someone else, and they're going to help someone else out, right? And the ultimate net effect, or the net impact that is caused from that, also is exponential. Because you can see it spreads in the world, right? And ultimately, it actually serves more people. So it seems pretty well aligned with the purpose, right? In our industry, Agile is a very popular framework for managing projects, but it is just as much of a mindset as it is a framework, in my opinion. I kind of think Agile is somewhere around risk management and prioritization and continuous learning. I feel like it kind of combines those concepts. And if you think about it, like sprints tend to split up work into these fixed periods of time when a set of expected ceremonies happen. Sprint planning, as an example, emphasizes prioritization to help frame and set expectations for a sprint, but also allows the team to interact and provide some advice and set expectations. On the tail end, at the end of a sprint, you have a retrospective, and that allows the entire team to share and grow in a very transparent and kind of innovative way. But I think the key aspect here is really around learning. Sprints are kind of built around this cyclical pattern that you can see here in the image of build, measure, and learn, right? You know, we're going to do some work, we're going to see if that work was effective, and we're going to try to learn from that for the next sprint that we dive into. And because it's cyclical, what is learned can then be rolled in and ultimately can lead to improvements and evolution. The basis for these principles are really around being more effective with your underlying purpose, right? Retrospectives, as an example, can yield a lot of ideas to try for future sprints. So if you're doing this and you're learning and you're coming up with these cool new things that you might want to try out, it's an opportunity, right? But one thing that I think people make a mistake on is I think people want or look at guarantees. Like, oh, I want to see results, right? But I think, you know, when I look at ideas that are generated from teams and when people have discussions, you shouldn't be bound by some guarantee of improvement. And it's really because if new ideas don't bring the results that you want, why don't you just remove them later, right? What's the problem with, you know, just ending the experiment, right? And I really do think that the concept of experimentation is overlooked, but it can be critical to success. You shouldn't just continue to do the things that you're used to doing because you've always done it that way. You're missing out on really key opportunities for potential improvement. With experiments, there should be some hope or some knowledge around desired outcomes. You want to see something come from that, right? But I think the concept of bounded experimentation is rather useful in this framing. Having data points, metrics, KPIs, and some sense of expected results is important to track. Because really, you need to know when or if it's the right time to pull the plug on your experiment. Reviewing potential outcomes, either in retrospectives, at the end of a sprint or whatever, or at a specific cost metric, like, okay, we've spent $10,000 with this experiment. Where are we right now? That can help you to reflect at a known boundary without incurring more risk. One small example, if you end up spending one day evaluating a new technology, that's a lot safer than some endless review that you would spend months and months and months digging into something that you might not end up using. So bounding experiments can really help you to try out big ideas, but also to manage risk. So to reiterate this section, so we need to evolve beyond just this technical excellence to focus on our real purpose of serving people. We need to frame everything that we do around impact, and I shared some ideas around prioritization, efficacy, enablement, continuous learning, and experimentation. So far, so good? All right. Not too sleepy yet? The next section is around evolving ourselves. So we need to shift gears a bit, like let's kind of change our mental model at this point in time. We've gone from looking at the space and skills to one of ourselves. So classically, again, we've been taught to prioritize these technical and analytical skills, but we now know and we've seen that this can introduce a lot of negativity and definitely introduce stress, right? So we need to shift our focus more to people. We are also recognizing that this industry isn't quite the green field that people make it out to be, especially from an outsider's perspective. But to take it a step farther, we need to recognize that we can't control other people. I think we have a much better opportunity to try to change ourselves and evolve as human beings. And I want to just ask a simple question. What can we do to reach our fullest potential as people? So I wanted to share some thoughts on that. Let's begin by highlighting a social responsibility that I think largely goes unrecognized. Skill and confidence is an unconquered army. And that was by George Herbert. So while we're taught that learning as much as we can and these skills are great and all of that, kind of what happens behind the scenes is we begin to get more confident, right? Our confidence grows because our skills grow. And hey, we're like, wow, we're actually doing this, right? We start to kind of shed our skin of the imposter syndrome and we become a little bit more capable. We can take on more tickets that we hadn't been able to do before. And the outcome of that is our confidence grows. But this confidence can really boil over into an unwelcomed ego. The unconquered army that is highlighted in this quote, it's ourselves. And the combination of this skill and this confidence can generate, in some essence, maybe some closed-mindedness. It's when we make things about ourselves that we can't really see our real purpose and the effects that we have on other people. I believe that. Not only are opinions shut down, but innovation dies. We rob others of their opportunities to learn and to explore in this industry. It's very likely that someone around us, or someone in our career path, afforded us opportunities to learn and grow. You shouldn't let your ego prevent someone else from getting this same opportunity. We need to rise above this to reach our fullest potential. And quite frankly, I think it's just key to be decent. I think it is. You have to do that to be a good person. According to some prominent psychology research, I couldn't find any specific sources for this, I apologize, but I've read a lot of things that people talk about these sorts of things. Every single person, each one of you, myself included, We have millions of different factors that play into our behaviors and how we see the world. Millions. Millions, okay? And this is what makes us all incredibly unique and difficult to know and difficult to understand ourselves completely or holistically. Self-awareness is incredibly hard to do. We all have blind spots, as an example, right? But it's just as hard to know and recognize what other people are dealing with. They have millions of factors too. So we need something just a bit simpler, I think, to help us recognize and evaluate our being and our essence of who we are. So given these complexities, how can we get a sense of this awareness? What can we do? And the Japanese came up with a concept called ikigai. I'm not sure if I...
Ikigai.
What's that?
Ikigai.
Ikigai. Thank you. Yeah, you said it much better than me. Thank you. I knew I was going to butcher it. Yeah, it's like, I'm presenting on this. So I was trying to get a sense of like what its actual translation was in English, and I think it sits somewhere in between purpose, being, and life. Somewhere in that space, right? So I want to do a quick review of this diagram here. There's kind of 4 quadrants of this, right? There's what we love, what the world needs, what we're good at, and what we can be paid for. And then they overlap into several kind of sections about our passions, our missions, our professions, and our vocation, right? And the overlap of all of those things end up kind of having good and bad effects on things of your life, framing of it. So one example is if you have a strong overlap of what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what you love, that might yield you satisfaction, but the feeling of no positive impact on the world if you fall in one specific area. So in some respects, right, I like to look at this chart as a balancing act to try to understand a lot of these complex factors around ourselves. So I think the ideal is to try to reach the center, right? The goal is to try to get right in the middle where all of these complex factors are balanced and they're equal, right? But the farther from the center that you get, the worse you feel, right? You're like really lacking all of the other areas, so you're not balanced at all. So what's really cool about this diagram, though, is it actually gives us a much more straightforward framework to check in with ourselves, see how we're doing, and see how we're feeling, right? And maybe we can identify with one or more of these overlaps or one or more of these main areas. Or we can ask questions around these topics to help us understand where we fall in this diagram. I also believe it's an opportunity to leverage this concept to help define and understand our own purpose. So I feel like it's important for us as individuals to do that. And I look at Drupal, and I think it's completely applicable in a largely volunteer-led community, right? If we're using our spare time to volunteer, it may be helping to fill or satisfy one of these needs that is on the chart, right? Maybe we want to stay relevant. Maybe we want to learn more. Maybe we want to have a positive impact on the world. And maybe we're looking to, give back to this community to be more attractive for job prospects. That could fall under the vocation or the profession, right? There's a lot going on here, in my mind. It can also explain why certain people in our industry show up with a less than ideal version of themselves. If you read these labels that are in the overlap, it tells a lot about what might be happening. Someone might be experiencing emptiness. They might be experiencing uncertainty. They might be feeling like they don't have any positive impact. They might be having concerns about their own sustainability. These things have a very real effect on people. So as we learn to become a little more self-aware, I wanted to share some thoughts on traits that I believe are important for those that I've seen that are leading by example in this realm. I want to start with curiosity. So we previously discussed the need for continuous learning, right? And we put our ego aside. We can recognize the wealth of opportunities that we have to learn from other people. I learn from all of you in the room, routinely. Yeah. We need to be curious. We need to ask questions, and we need to seek shared understanding in this world. This helps us to learn and helps us to engage in thoughtful conversations that can help both parties, right? If you have some concerns with peers or those that you're interacting with, don't be a jerk. Be curious. Don't assume malice. Don't assume bad intent. Maybe someone's having a really bad day. Maybe someone lost someone that they cared about. Maybe someone's dealing with some difficulty in their professional career. Maybe they are. A lack of curiosity can make a bad situation even worse for somebody else. We don't need to be judgmental. And sometimes people, in our industry also get caught up in job titles. Seen that a lot. We think or believe that, being a senior or being a principal, you need to have all the answers, right? Like, I think that's crap. That's not true at all. Someone more senior, they may have strong skills, but our industry is so diverse that it's impossible to know everything. It's literally impossible. Those are putting expectations on those people that are not fair. And we need to look at it from the other side. I think that every single person that's in this industry, that's doing this for a living and actively participates, they have something to contribute, right? Even the micro interactions from some of the least experienced people that are on our teams or those that we work with or interact with, they can offer really humbling moments of truth and growth for every single person that's on the team, including the most senior people. So point blank, if you're doing this work for a living, I think you have a story to tell, and I think you have something meaningful to share. I also think that humility is a key trait for the egoless, right? It gets to the whole rock star developer phenomenon, right? So you might have these amazing skills and everything, and you can be great at what you do, but I have seen that sometimes a lack of humility can be that element that brings the toxicity to either a team or a community. And this can even show up publicly, even for people in Drupal doing that. Teams value team players, right? Those that are selfless and help and promote other people and build them up. Those are good team players, right? That makes teams stronger. I think it requires humility to do it effectively. Who remembers those SNL skits, right? Where, you've got this help desk and they get this phone call and someone brings their computer over. And I think it was Chris Kattan, I might be wrong, but, it's like, oh, I can't get my computer to turn on. Move! And he yells right at the person and he's like, really aggressively, and staring at the person that needed help. And he would proceed to go and belittle them for their lack of technical skills. Is that really what we want? Would you want to be treated that way? I don't think so, right? There's just something really off about it. And they took a very extreme view on that. But honestly, I've seen that show up. It's not cool, right? I also think that empathy can really help people to remain humble. Our industry, as I said, I've shared this a couple times, is always changing. And it's already challenging to keep up with all of this stuff. We all should be having empathy for everybody involved in it, right? Remember back when you were learning, were there even, simple things that you would make a mistake on? Like, remember that, right? I would bet yes. I mean, and from my personal experience, I can't even remember how many semicolons I missed putting at the end of lines, right? Or misspelling variables and not catching it, and then spending an hour or two looking at this and banging my head against the wall and saying, "That should work, why isn't it working?" Furthermore, we already are dealing with that, right? But we already have enough people being nasty behind a keyboard. We already have it. We don't need any more of that. If you make a mistake, is it better to recognize that you probably were once there at some point in time, if not still there at certain moments, right? And try to offer constructive help, Or are you going to turn around and be critical and possibly turn these people off to our industry altogether? What's your choice? I think a lot of us have been through difficult situations being a part of this industry. We've seen late nights. We've had unrealistic demands being imposed on us. And there's a lot more that I could go on. Sometimes this gets referenced by the phrase trial by fire, right? I've heard that so many times. But the last thing, ultimately, is if we're dealing with all this difficulty and we're relying on certain people for support, we don't want those people to make us feel stupid or incapable. Bring empathy and do not pile on to an already difficult situation. We live in a pretty fast-paced, on-demand, connected world now, right? We saw the rise of the smartphones, our broadband's getting better, right? All these homes have this really fast internet. Chattanooga has this, massively fast internet here, right? And it's like, publicly available, right? It's not even, privatized. It's a big deal, right? But I find it exhausting. I don't know about any of you. I do. I think it's exhausting. Mentally, we're constantly shifting between having to do development, reading blog posts, exploring social media, then we even pile on, we watch entertainment, on our iPads and TVs. And we do even more than that. We are constantly stimulated. Constant. Take a break. Take a break. Get away from the screen. Recharge your batteries, because you're going to burn out. It's a lot. Our brains need that downtime. My wife tells me that all the time, and I'm really bad at it. And I'm talking to myself here. But I promise you, if you take that break, you pause, you'll feel rejuvenated. And you're likely going to do even better work that you would have done otherwise if you're not staring at the screen for 12 hours a day. Pausing things can be filed under the work smarter and not harder bucket. You're going to be much more capable of doing and bringing your best self if you do that. So if you're going to pause, right, and take a break from the screen, why not connect with actual human beings? Let's do that. Pause from your wired lifestyle, come up for air, and ask how people are doing. Celebrate people's wins. Support them during their losses. And if you can do so in person, it means a lot. Especially when we're not just doing so behind a keyboard. And if you have to do it remotely, turn on your webcam. Say hi. Give someone a smile. Just interact with them as people, right? And that's one thing that I actually learned to really, really love about members of the community and everybody in the room who I know quite well. We have great people. We have amazing people. And I probably would not have noticed that if I didn't look up from the screen. So this is a bit of a complex topic, and I think it's can also introduce a lot of yeah, it's complex, and I think it can be a little risky. I will not get into any specifics about this, but I do believe that everyone should recognize and know their own boundaries. And every single person is different in that. When we don't honor our boundaries, or we're not aware of them, this can massively and adversely affect us in a very, very bad way. It could lead to burnout. We could be inconsistent at work. We could get really tired. We could struggle with our mental or physical health. I need to go for a run. The competitive nature of our industry is one that makes us feel like we need to be always on. Or we have to keep up with these latest innovations. We have to do more. And I know everybody wants to stay relevant, and they want to be responsible for the things that they need to be responsible for, especially at work or, community or whatever, right? We need to avoid the perception that doing more serves us. Set limits and honor those limits. Do it. There are also ethical boundaries that people need to honor about themselves. Maybe for you, it's not working on holidays. Maybe it's also respecting your values as a person. There are countless more, but you need to know them. We all want to be consistent, and we want to help. But often, what I have found is this really only yields short-term wins that have a longer-term consequence. Maybe your personal relationships start failing. Maybe you start questioning your own ethics. And none of this is positive. Your boundaries are critical for you staying afloat in this industry. So if we're committing to evolving ourselves, it's my opinion that we're going to really help to drive the purpose and the impact that we're capable of having. That's my thought. All right, another mental shift. We've talked about purpose, we've talked about ourselves and people and evolving ourselves. Let's take a look a little bit about Drupal. Why not? We're here at a Drupal camp, right? Seems fitting. If we're able to bring our best selves and we can have impact, I think the Drupal community is really a worthy cause that offers opportunities that may interest you or help you in some way. So I want to take a moment and reflect a bit on where we are as a community and look at some of our collective purpose and impact. And I also want to frame that in terms of like the project Drupal and the community Drupal. I want to look at how we've evolved over time and some opportunities we have moving forward. Oh boy, am I running low on time? All right, I'm going to book it. Here we go. So as a project, we've been around for about 17 years. We've hit 8 major versions. We've got millions of installations in the world and thousands of contributors that are participating. It's extremely impressive, and we have a lot of staying power. I wrote a blog post, and I also framed a question when I was at Drupaldelphia a couple of weeks ago. It kind of hit me very impromptu, but I was like, is Drupal legacy? Is it? I mean, it's been around a pretty damn long time now, right? So I'd like to frame that discussion both in terms of community and Drupal as a product. So let's keep going. I don't remember exactly when this picture was taken, right? But I mean, that's a sea of people. What, Portland? Yeah, okay.
It's the green shirt in the middle is me.
Oh yeah, I can see it. Yeah. But every time I see it, I really kind of imagine this, like, the Drupal balloon kind of floating, like crowds surfing through the crowd, right? It'd be kind of fun. But back to the topic, though. We as a community really have routinely involved, and we've solved problems, and we've brought stuff back to the community to help us scale to where we are today. We have done that. I know people immediately think we have a BDFL, right? A benevolent dictator for life, and they think of this control factor of like the dictatorship, right? But honestly, I don't think we would ever get here today if Dries hadn't recognized that he needed to get out of the day-to-day activities and the routine of doing Drupal, right? So Matthew Tiff just wrote a really cool blog post for the Lullabot folks, right? That talked about analyze core commits, and he looked at all these different things. And we've scaled over time from a perspective where Dries was the only one committing to now we have subsystem maintainers and core committers and initiative leads. And all of them are trained in the same way of working and style of working. And Angie Byron did a very similar talk where she talked about the evolution of the governance of Drupal itself, the formation of the Drupal Association, the CWG, and much, much, much more. And last year, I led a community-driven governance task force to look and see where we have opportunities to involve. There was tons of interviews, and it yielded a 50-page report of findings and context around recommendations. Many of the task force recommendations are in progress, right? So things like event organizer groups, I saw Kaleem here earlier, and efforts to strengthen diversity and inclusion. That's going to make our community a lot better and stronger. And we still need more passionate people to help and participate. Most notably, though, I think we still need to strengthen a centralized vision for our largely decentralized community, and the need for more significant mentoring and a better process around scaling ideas. Change can be very hard. I don't think it should be knee-jerk. That causes people to get really antsy. But also, we shouldn't wait too long to change because it might make it feel like we're being stale. But just be mindful that we should be comfortable changing things and reevaluating to see what works and doesn't. We shouldn't be expecting perfection. And sometimes we do. That's not fair. Let's take a look at Drupal as a product. I promise you I'm almost done. I will get this done as soon as I can. Drupal as a product has also evolved, and I really want to focus on the big shift between 7 and 8. We really got off of the island, and I really believe that we went from something that was a fairly bespoke and highly customized product itself to one that we owned a higher responsibility within open source, to contributing to other projects, leveraging other projects that are best of breed. And we brought in a ton of change, though. We used to spend years and years and years perfecting these major versions, and they didn't even have new features rolled into them, right? Now we have experimental features and new features rolled into every minor version of core. And we're rolling out both technical and non-technical initiatives. And my belief is that this is demonstrating a very real shift towards people and purpose over just technical excellence. It's like we took something that was born of volunteers, hobbyists, and people in the world just kind of poking around with this, and we're now beginning to mature it and emphasize the needs of people and humans. So as an example, like Roy Schulten, he was announced as the first UX lead of Drupal that we've ever had. I think it was about a year ago now. We've also seen these new initiatives like Layout Builder and the JavaScript modernization that are building these highly refined user experiences. They're actually making Drupal a lot easier to use and adopt. And it's more competitive, ultimately, right? So I can't help but feel like we're moving towards a more purposeful future. But one thing that kind of scares me a bit is when I see these kinds of diagrams, right? So for the last 5 years, according to the Octaverse in Drupal, even though we made massive architectural changes from 7 to 8, we made big, big, big change, right? We still have things, we still have a lot of competing factors, right? I'm sure we even lost people between the change. In fact, we had Backdrop, which was a fork of Drupal, right? Kind of fragmented things a bit. So my belief with Drupal specifically is I really kind of feel like we should have changed more gradually over time and not so drastically at once. But today, we're really facing other challenges. If you look at this diagram here, JavaScript for the last 5 years straight has been the #1 language that people have contributed to in this space. #1, consistently. 5 years. In tech, that is a long time, right? While Drupal leverages JavaScript, I really feel like we're missing out a bit on trying to get in on this technology and understand how it can serve our community and our technical product, right? And I really do think that we have an opportunity to expand Drupal into a wider audience. One idea that I have that we were discussing last night even is having an alternate replacement for Drupal's theming system that's built on Gatsby, right? Being able to leverage all the concepts of the Node community, all the cool innovations that are happening with these plugins and Gatsby itself, developing in React, using JSX, having GraphQL, and pulling all of that from Drupal's JSON APIs. I think that'd be a really great way to kind of modernize things and bring something cool and relevant back into the community. I think it would be really hard, but who's afraid of some hard problems, right? We've solved other ones before. We should embrace it and see what merits it has. I want to thank all of you for listening to me and go over a little bit longer than what I was intending. You have an amazing opportunity here in Chattanooga to learn from people at this camp. What are you going to do with this information that you've received? I think it's important for you to recognize that you need to be accountable for that and be the change that you want to see to help the world evolve. Focus on your purpose. Thank you.